obedience never really felt safe to me. I know what it's like to hear verses about trusting God and all the things, and for a long time it just felt like a lump in my throat. Like I would get really anxious because I felt like I don't know how to do this, because trust and obedience was attached to my abuse and my trauma. Hey, lovely souls. Today I am here. I'm back, and this is a little different of a format because I'm not teaching today, but I definitely want to speak to you who might have watched my Ruth video, because I kept talking about obedience and trusting, right? And what happens when obedience hurts? Because of past trauma, because of abuse that you have endured. And my story is a story of some of that. And I want to share it because maybe it's your story too. And I just want to talk, and I hope that it blesses somebody out there. Okay, so this is important to me because I know what it's like to follow God, but I definitely carried pain because obedience never really felt safe to me. I know what it's like to hear verses about trusting God and all the things, and for a long time it just felt like a lump in my throat. Like I would get really anxious because I felt like I don't know how to do this, because trust and obedience was attached to my abuse and my trauma. So obedience was definitely something that felt hard. I wanted to be faithful, and I tried really hard for many years to be faithful to God, but in my trying, I still didn't know how to trust Him fully. And because of my experiences, I often felt very guarded towards God and towards that full trust that we preach about, we talk about. Especially now, I'm talking about when I was talking about the Book of Ruth, right? So let me tell you a little bit about me, just so you have an understanding of where I'm coming from. I'm not going to go into details of every experience of my life because we don't have the time, and I don't think it's necessary. I have been in church since I was 3 years old. My stepdad and my mom got married around that time, and they started going to church, so therefore I started going to church. I taught Sunday school by the time I was 12. I've been in many worship teams. I even went to Bible college for about a year. I loved God, yet I also lived through some really hard things that made me question if God loved me. So, because when I was a child, I was abused. Yeah, I was sexually abused. I It didn't stop there because I dealt with that when I was older. I got married when I was 19, and by the time I was 24, I was divorced. And you know, after my divorce, I found myself getting myself in relationships where I ended up experiencing more domestic violence. Well, domestic violence. I didn't experience that with my ex-husband. We just didn't get along. We were young, and I was like, yeah, dealing with trauma and things. And anyway, like that's a whole thing. I don't, yeah, I just like being very careful because I did experience domestic violence, and I just want to make sure that I always clarify that he had nothing to do. Like that was not him who did that. But I did. I got myself in relationships where I ended up experiencing domestic violence. Again, like I mentioned, that came with more sexual abuse. I just, and I hate saying this part because it's really hard for me as somebody who is a follower of Christ, but I also experienced spiritual abuse by someone who shall be left unnamed because that person is no longer in leadership and has been exposed for who he truly is. And I didn't have to do anything. God did it. And yeah. So okay. After my divorce, I was single. I was a single mom for 12 years, and it was hard. It was hard because I love God and I wanted to raise my son in church, and I was trying to do my best. And like, I would go to church, I would do the things, but like the depth of the pain that I felt was something where I just couldn't like let go. And there were seasons where I was fine, right? Like, I would smile at church, everything was good. But there were times where I was like, smile at church, but went home and like cried myself to sleep. I struggled with a lot of thoughts to delete my life. I did a few things to try to do that, and then like I didn't succeed. The one thing that didn't happen is I didn't end up in like a psych ward, and I probably should have a few times because I was so, yeah. But it was like weird because, and I think that's probably why I didn't end up, because I had experienced stuff for so long in my life that I think I learned to disassociate. I think that's the right term, where I literally could just be this happy, bubbly person. I'm a very extroverted by nature type person, and be with friends and do the things and then go home and just completely fall apart, right? So I was masking it a lot. I finally said something to my then pastors about my wanting and attempt, and they just loved me. They just loved me and tried to help me. And after that incident, I was very careful to, yeah, I was just more mindful to no longer hide anything, because I think that one of the biggest things that for me is I learned to hide my pain for so long that it was just natural. So I would just like bottle everything in, and then I was like, when it was like, when I was down there, I was down there. And that experience helped me with the no longer being silent about my mental health struggles. And if I ever felt and had thoughts to end my life, I would right away like reach out to trusted people who just like prayed for me, or I would come over their house so I wouldn't be alone. So I have been, I would say this much, with everything that I've dealt with and my lack of trust for God, I can look back and see his hand at work every single step of the way. Yet still, I walked away from God. I tell you, it's hard, and I laugh with discomfort. It's not because it's not funny. I'm just uncomfortable with the conversation because I walked away from God not like once or twice, or like I walked away from God like over 7 times. I would just not go to church and be gone and be doing whatever, right? And then come back. And there came a point in my life where I was comfortable being in church and not being in church. Like I was good either way. And it was like a weird thing where honestly, I like the devil is a whole liar. I definitely think that when we struggle with things, we can get to a place where we're comfortable in both worlds, meaning we're comfortable in church, we're comfortable when we're not in church, until something happens that triggers that need to be in church or triggers that thing to get out of church. Church hurt is real, and I am going to have a whole episode about church hurt because it does matter. And as much as we want to preach against the spirit of offense, we have to preach against the spirit of offensiveness because it happens and we never know who in our church pews is dealing with stuff that one word can set them off and get them out of church because of whatever layers of things. Again, I don't want to get into that because this is specifically about my experience with trusting God and like getting there. So I just wanted to throw that in there because anyway. But I got to the point that I was so disconnected with God that I just was searching and looking and like trying to figure out, like feeling anything that would remove whatever this pain was. And I found myself working with people who were messing with crystals and doing this and doing that and astrology and like all these things which seem very innocent to me. And I started playing around with it to the point that I dabbled into witchcraft without even realizing it until somebody who doesn't even really, I don't even think she went to church. I was talking to her about some of the stuff that I was doing, and she was like, "Girl, you're messing with witchcraft. What are you doing?" And I still ignored it. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I found myself even listening to podcasts talking about witchcraft and how we're witches and this and that. Y'all, the level of the depth of my deception was just so beyond what I can explain in this episode in this I don't know, whatever this is in this video. I am here by the grace of God because even though I kept pushing him away or playing games or whatever I was doing, however you want to label it, God intervened every single time. He intervened when I was trying to hurt myself. I intervened when he intervened when I tried to hurt myself. He intervened when I was messing with witchcraft to the point that my therapist, who's a Christian woman, literally was like, "Girl, whatever you're doing, like I can't even be in your house." That's how bad it was. And something in me was just like what am I doing? And the thing is that for me, I spent most of my life thinking that obedience to God meant just trying harder. So when I was in church and I was better, I was doing all the church things. Again, I led worship, I was teaching Sunday school, I was serving, I spent hours at church. But again, like at that time, like I was better. I wasn't messing with anything. I was literally, I really was trying to be faithful to God and trying to figure this thing out with Him. But I just kept thinking, I just have to try harder and all of this would go away. But deep inside, I didn't trust Him. So therefore, this is why I ended up where I ended up. I would end up leaving the church because I just couldn't trust them. And how do you trust God when people who were in your life as people who were supposed to be like a father figure caused you pain? From abandonment to, you know, how they spoke to you, to how they treated you. And I'm speaking because I know that somebody here is watching and it's like asking the same question, like, how can I trust a God when like my own father didn't love me, wasn't trustworthy, right? Because in reality, what happens is that we don't know how to separate God's character from the character of the people who misuse his name, or the character of the people that are supposed to be like our elders or our parents or whoever it is in that person is in your life. So I learned to obey out of fear because growing up, you obey your parents, you obey your pastor out of pressure, out of performance, but not always out of love. And God had to take me through a lot. Like, anyway, like there's a lot I had to learn in the process. I thought when I was younger that obedience would protect me, but obedience without trust will break you. And when you can't trust a person that's supposed to be, for example, like a father figure, it's very hard, right? Because you're obeying again out of fear, out of pressure, out of performance, right? But if you can't trust them, it's very heavy, it's very lonely, and eventually it leads to burnout or even bitterness. And I know this because I have lived both. I have lived in bitterness for years. I lived in bitterness and I lived in burnout. Again, when you're trying to perform as a form of obedience, eventually burnout happens. But what's beautiful about God is that He not only intervened, He just kept coming back. You know, um, I just kept thinking like, oh, it's just me. Like I just need the high of being in church, or I just, this is what I know since I was a little girl. So being in a church felt safe, right? So I thought that I was just going back to church because it felt good. I look back and I think now how he just kept coming after me and drawing me in and putting that desire in me, even when I was trying to fight him, literally yell at God at times. He just kept chasing after me. And he didn't wait for me to be perfect or strong or churchy enough. He came when I was in my wilderness. He came when I was in my house where I was messing with witchcraft stuff and put stuff in my house like, oh Lord Jesus, help me. I I I lost. I'm telling y'all, I lost my whole mind during that time. And the level of bitterness and just anger that I had was beyond me, where I just couldn't stand it anymore. And he met me when I was just like, God, I'm just done. I'm done. And I remember, and I keep telling everybody, I remember saying to God, I'm either going to do this wholeheartedly or I'm done with trying to be this Christian woman. And I think it's one of those things where I came to the end of myself, and in that moment, he met me with kindness and grace, not shame, not guilt. And slowly, I stopped performing and I started healing. I always talk about that. That's the moment where I opened my Bible with frustration because I felt like all these years I have been in church. I have done all the things, and where do I go? Like, where do I go? And he led me there. And I began to understand that obedience was not about proving anything to anybody. I learned that obedience was a response to the love of God, who already proved everything on the cross. All his love. If you ever feel like you're not loved by God, I encourage you to read the Gospels, because I think we just need to remember that he first loved us. He went to the cross to bear all of our sins. And how can I not trust a God who was willing to die for me? And I think that's the moment that I came to realizing that I can trust him. Maturity kicked in, of realizing that everything I've experienced was not him orchestrating all of this. It was just people, sinful people. And I tell you what, my life has changed. Obviously, I have this channel, but before I had this channel, after 12 years of being a single mom and finding myself in relationships or situationships that were not good for me or even my child, I am now married to a wonderful man who loves me, who loves God, and mothering my now 20-year-old and now a stepmom of a 17-year-old boy. I have 2 sons. But it's beautiful to see how God redeemed me. And in all of this process, he has allowed me to walk along with survivors, women who have carried invisible wounds, just like I did, who have experienced abuse, of all kinds of abuse. And through that process, God has helped me heal. And I'm not perfect, but I'm redeemed. I am a woman who obeys God. I try my best to obey his word, but not because I am like afraid of him or I'm afraid of going, I don't know. I don't wrestle with God. I know God. I know his word. I don't struggle opening my Bible and finding more reasons to love him more. He is not a God who punished my mistakes. I made a lot. Somewhere a response to what I experienced, and somewhere self-inflicted. But he was a father who welcomed me home and who also helped heal my relationship with both of my fathers in the process. And I know I talked about the story of Ruth and her legacy, and how because of her obedience and trust to people and God at the time, it's why, she became, the grandmother of David, and all the things that we know about Ruth, right? And maybe my story is not going to be like Ruth, right? I mean, it's not, there's not a second Jesus. We have one Jesus. Like, that's it. Right? My story may not have this legacy where people will read about me for centuries later, right? But my legacy is watching my boys worship God with spirit and truth, because because of my obedience to God and me having a better relationship with God and people because I'm learning to trust. So I just want to say, like, if you ever felt disqualified or like your pain causes you to stop trusting God, if your obedience comes from fear instead of love, if at any point you've walked away and wondered if it's too late, I want you to know it's not too late. God sees you even now. He still wants you. I mean, God is not done writing our stories at all. And I want to encourage you to take time to meet Him where you are. And it may not be loud, it may be in a quiet room all by yourself. Of you just saying, God, I'm done. And I just know that you are better for me. Because that was my prayer. Like, I know, because mind you, yeah, okay, I struggle with like not knowing where to go in the Bible, but I've been in church my whole life. I know the main stories. I've listened to the messages. I have heard the testimonies of the people who have walked similar paths. And at that moment, I was reminded of those stories. So I want to share mine with you to let you know that God still sees you. You're not too far gone. If I was not too far gone, I know you are not too far gone. It is possible to obey God from a place of joy. It is possible to trust God. And when we let go, when we allow Him to really heal those wounds that are in us, when we allow Him, give Him that room, give Him that permission to do that, and we just surrender. It's not easy, but it's possible. He can really do the work of healing that you need. So, if this testimony story stirs something in your heart, or you know somebody who's struggling and they could use encouragement, I wouldn't say like send it to them as like, hey, I know you're broken, here's this video, it might help you. Like, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's not do that. You can share it. You know, if you never know who's experiencing wilderness in their lives, they may be sitting in right next to you in the church pew, and they may be struggling, and you just don't know. You don't know because they look the part, or they sing the part, they stand on the platform. You never know. So I encourage you to share it, and please do me a favor. Please share with me in the comments. You don't have to tell me your whole story, but if you have experienced God's redemptive love, where you have been gone at one point, or you didn't grow up in church and you just, you met God when you were older, whatever that may look like, and God redeemed your story, put it in the comments. Let's encourage each other. I feel like the world is very loud right now, and I have been struggling with how to share this video because I know that it's hard and times are hard. But I also know that people need encouragement, and people need to be reminded that there is a God that loved them, that died for them. This is not an exclusive club just for the cool kids, This is for everybody. The gospel is for everyone. But in order for the gospel to reach people, we have to share it. And we have to remind people that God is better. I just know that we live in a broken world, and we're always going to have issues and situations, and the news are crazy right now, and I'm struggling. I don't even know how to end this video. I feel like now I'm just rambling. I just want to encourage people, and if this was helpful to you, please share it. Again, if you have a testimony, or you want to share how God has helped you or redeemed you, or you have felt the love of God, please share it to encourage somebody. Until next time, just stay rooted in God's word and stay grounded in His love.